let's take a look at the other attributes. So what we were covering there underneath UI control type is being used in the UI control entity, specifically in the type attribute of the UI control entity. Now, this is, again, going to restrain my list of options that I can select when I create a UI control in the rules or assign a value to the field type to just that custom data type list of options. Now let's cover a few of the concepts involved in the rest of the UI control attributes. I won't go into all of them just yet because sometimes you'll use very few of them very infrequently, and many of them are applicable only for particular UI control types. Data source will be used when we want to populate out the list of drop-down options from a URL that contains a JSON array of values, of key value pairs of records that we want to render as options. For example, again, we might want to pull in a URL containing the JSON structure of names and values for states. So when we create a UI control where the type is multiple choices, optionally we can use that data source attribute as the means to paste a URL containing those options that we want to render for the user. In the case when we do that, we'll also need to then potentially, if it's not formatted just right in terms of having a field with display name and a field for value, then we would need to tell Corticon, or within the rules, we would need to assign values to where to find the value and the display name of those multiple choice options. Again, we're going to get into a better option, or actually in practice use of that attribute later on. Field name is going to be where we store the value that the user selects. So if I say that the field name for a given UI control is city, then we will store whatever the user inputs there underneath the attribute city of the entity that we have assigned to be the path to data. ID, it can be any alphanumeric string of text as long as it is unique within the context of that particular UI, of that particular stage in the dynamic form. Label will be the prompt above a given UI control. So if I'm asking for your birth date, it will be the text that describes precisely what I'm asking for, such as please enter birthday. Label position, self-explanatory. I can define where I want that to be rendered within. Max, max date, min date are going to be optional validation parameters that I can assign to date time UI controls or number data types where I want to restrict the user to only a constrained list of options. And the value field will be used in the case when I am wanting to either assign what the default value for a user input selection will be, or in the case of when I'm doing read-only text controls, this is where I'm actually going to be putting the read-only text content underneath the value field. It's only with the read-only text UI control that we would use value in that way to render just a static HTML line of text versus using the label field. That's because we can also use the label field optionally when we use the read-only text UI control type, but the actual control itself, the string of text that we want to render as read-only text, is going to be read from and populated based upon the string of text within the value field of that UI control. Now, when we do multiple choice UI controls, we'll need to use one of two different options to define where those options are going to live within the multiple choice dropdown. That's what both of these are doing. Data source options is used when, again, the JSON array from a data source being used to pull in all of the different options that we want to provide to the user in a dropdown. If we don't have a perfectly formatted array of name or display names and values as key pairs, then we'll need to tell the front end what the field name is, such as state name in the case when the name of the value of the field is not just display name. If it's state name, then we would define what the text field is going to be called to be state name. and the value field to be wherever the actual value is stored for that particular key value pair that we want to render to the user. Sometimes it might be a deeply nested JSON array that we're looking to parse through in order to access the options to then be rendered by the UI control. That's when we might use the path to options array attribute within that data source options association entity. And that's where I can put in the JSON path to access the aspect of that JSON document where I want to read in the values for the drop-down options of a multiple choice UI control.